Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cross Culture Critic. I'm Chris.
And I'm Joe.
How you doing?
I'm hanging in. How about you?
Oh, it's been a day.
It has
been a day. Yeah,
but it's a day where it's light out.
It is
we're
light
recording
outside.
now, and there's light.
It's light, so I can see my bank statement to say how poor I am.
Oh,
because
that's
my wife did taxes today, and man. Okay, so I'm just gonna get into this. My wife is a freelancer.
Okay.
So she does kind of freelance writing, editing, marketing consulting for all these different clients. She's done it for about 2 years. Lets her work from home. But every year we get screwed over on taxes.
Okay.
Because ideally you could pay like a quarterly amount, which we're doing this year. But to pay that quarterly amount, you're taking money out of, I could throw this at daycare. I could throw this. So you need to live.
Right, exactly.
So we always end up with a huge tax bill. And so she went to go do taxes today. And we were anticipating that it would be bad. So we're like, well, just know it's going to be bad. Be prepared for it. And she went with a new preparer today. We went with someone who was a little more familiar with freelance. And she went over to someone who was recommended, H&R Block. And sure enough, bad tax bill. Exactly what we expected. What I did not expect, the bill to put our taxes together.
From H&R Block?
From H&R Block, I was expecting $100, $150. $600.
Yeah.
$600 for an hour of work.
I know someone who went to H&R Block, did the exact same thing. Went to H&R Block, they did all their taxes, and when they were done, they were like, okay, kind of like, what's your cut? And it was the same thing. It was like $500, and they were like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
They walked out of H&R Block. They just didn't pay. And I was like, well, what happened? And she was like, nothing. I just walked out. And I was like, they haven't contacted you?
They have your Social Security.
I was like, they haven't contacted you? Nope.
Wow.
Nothing has come of it. And this was a decade ago. Nothing has come of it.
That's crazy.
She was just like, I'm not paying this. And walked out.
That's insane. Just 600. I was trying to figure out, what's that for? And I guess they charge per form. So we have, my wife has a bunch of different clients, so she has a bunch of different 1099s. But still, we're talking 50 minutes of work.
Yeah.
600. There's no. I have taken my car in for serious repairs, and it's been less than $600.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, I'm glad she was the one who went though, because I would have lost it.
Heck yeah.
I would have been like your friend was and just walked out and be like, nope.
No, I mean that's robbery.
Yeah.
I mean that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how you can honestly say that. Again, it's like a mechanic saying, I put brakes on your car. You owe me $3,000.
Yeah.
No, you
well, here's the thing. A mechanic,
$60 in parts.
Before they put that on your car, a mechanic is going to call you and tell you, hey, it's going to cost $3,000 to put these parts on your car. They told her when she was done.
Yeah.
So they give her the thing. Hey, taxes are going to suck. By the way, $600 for signing these forms.
Yeah, that's the racket.
So that's our wonderful day, and we
did I tell you how my taxes went?
I think I know, and I don't think I want you to tell me.
Yeah,
it was nice, right?
Yeah, I went. My buddy of mine did my taxes. Went to submit them. They got rejected.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he did them again.
I thought you were gonna say I got like a $10,000 refund.
No. So he went to submit them again, and they got rejected. So both the federal and state. So he calls them like, "What's up?" And they're like, "Well, there could be a number of reasons." I'm thinking like someone submitted, tax returns in my name, fraud. And so he's like, so IRS told him to, and the state of Michigan said that to mail the forms. Mm-hmm. So he mailed them. So that's going to take 6 to 8 weeks. And then they got to look them over and then all that stuff. So I mean, I'm going to get a tax refund. Even if there's been fraud, I'll show that it wasn't me and all that stuff. And I'll get a refund. But instead, I was thinking, as soon as I got my W-2s, I was like, I was on top of it.
Yeah.
I was on top of it. I called my buddy. I was like, hey, can you help me with, do my taxes stuff? And he does it for me every year. So he's like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, if I give you a couple of bucks, could you do it ASAP? Because I'd love to get this money back. Mm-hmm. The sooner the better. So I was on top of it. He was on top of it. And
someone else was on top of it.
Yeah, now it's going to be June or July by the time I'm getting somebody, to tell me what happened, because everyone in the country is probably sending their stuff to him, so I'm screwed. So I'm kind of just not even thinking about it.
This is the one time a year where I'm like, maybe I'm conservative. Because I hate this tax stuff. It used to be so nice. I used to laugh at my friends who dreaded tax time. Because I don't know what you're worried about. I get money back every year. And then I got married.
Yeah.
And that,
Yep.
for a while, we were both making too much to get, good money back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had kids. And then she went freelance. And it just, boom.
Yeah. My buddy used to tell me that he used to get tons back every year. And then he got married and it was like... they'd get $80 back. Now, mind you, I've been married, so I know what I used to get back, and it was okay. But now being single, I like my return a lot better.
Yeah, I bet. So, we're going to take a detour from the depressing stuff, and today we're going to talk about Flint Town, the Netflix TV show.
Yep.
It's an interesting thing to talk about because we're both local to it. It pertains to your job. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to talk about... you're obviously watching this as someone who's in law enforcement.
Right.
And I'm assuming, police work is probably the career that you see most on the big screen. And so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about maybe your favorite cop movies or TV shows. And then I'll do the same with writers. Mm-hmm. There are much fewer movies about writers, but they do exist. But do you watch a lot of cop movies, or do you sit there and nitpick too much?
I don't watch a whole lot of cop movies. Some of the ones that I guess you could say the industry, the business loves are Super Troopers, because it's Troopers. You can laugh at it, it's funny, but I'm one of the ones that don't I can't stand Super Troopers. I like the first 20 minutes. I think the first 20 minutes is funny. After that, I can't stand it. I like Training Day.
Oh, really?
Denzel
Okay.
Washington, Ethan Hawke. I like it because there's parts of it that I'm oh, when I worked as a police officer in Detroit, there's certain aspects that you're things were kind of like this. Mm-hmm. But again, for being a movie, it's so over the top. When I watch Training Day, if I watch it with my girlfriend or a friend or, family, whatever, I could kind of say, oh, this reminds me of blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But obviously it's nothing to the level of entertainment. And then... one show, police shows, I always, if Cops is on, I always love Cops.
Okay.
I've been watching Cops since I was in third grade. So Cops is always a good one. But my mom and people I know will be oh, are you watching Blue Bloods or True Blue or, all these things. And I'm no. And so all these new cop shows or things that come out, I don't watch. Shows NCIS or those types of shows are so far
they're soap operas.
Yeah, but I just mean the police work. So many people CSI, that's what I'm thinking of. So CSI, I'll go to somebody's house and somebody will have, somebody in the middle of the night took out their mailbox. Let's say they hit their mailbox with their car. And we get there in the morning and people have taken pictures of the tread marks and they've put plastic around the mailbox to see if somebody touched it.
Now you can get it. You can get them.
Yeah, and they think that we can go and we're gonna take a plaster cast of a tire tread because it hit a mailbox. These things aren't going to happen.
Yeah.
And if they are, or DNA and things like that, if somebody got their house broke into and someone smashed the window and then climbed through the window and cut themselves, yes, we will swab for blood. But people will be this tennis ball is moved. I saved it for fingerprints. It's ma'am, you can't fingerprint a tennis ball.
I also picked it up without wearing gloves.
Right.
I hope that doesn't.
And then it's well, on CSI, they put it in this thing and it hit it with smoke, and then they threw glitter on it, and the glitter stuck to the smoke, and and you're just you realize you're watching a television show. This doesn't work.
Yeah.
If we have a blood sample, we send it to Michigan State Police and they do it, and it's 6 months before you get that back. In CSI, everything happens in a glass room, in the hallway. Everyone's walking by. They can see into this amazing laboratory.
Well, and every crime on CSI is a huge murder.
It's a huge thing. And the person who responds to the scene is also the person that takes the evidence, who's also the person who's doing the DNA and putting it in the centrifuge, the blood. It's like it doesn't happen that way. So I hate watching shows like that because it's just like so fiction. But the one I do love, the two that I think if you want to watch a show that is about police work, and I think they got it pretty good. One, it's still entertainment value, but it's The Shield.
Okay, I have not seen The Shield, but it's on my list.
The Shield is great, and it's a great show that it's a binge watch type show. You got to watch one to the next, and it's a big, thing that leads in season to season. Things, that happen in season 1 are coming back in season 5 and things. So The Shield is always a good one to watch. I really like that because it's not over the top. Mm-hmm. It's kind of legit stuff. And then the other one that is right on point is The Wire.
I have The Wire also on my list of things I need to see.
So The Wire is, I think if you took a survey of everybody in law enforcement of like what show got it right, The Wire is going to be number 1.
I think you'd also, if you surveyed critics, they would tell you it's the best show on TV ever.
Oh, serious?
Yeah. Critics love it. I have never gotten around to it.
Oh, it's fantastic. Season 1 of The Wire is amazing. It grabs you. You're in. You're sucked in. Season 2 is horrible because like it shifts its focus on like, so all the characters that you get to meet in season 1 are not all the characters. It's like they take a back seat and you're introduced to a whole new...
Don't they do that every season?
Not really.
Okay.
So season 2, you're kind of introduced to like a whole new cast. There's still some of the old guys. And then season 3, it goes back to the others. And so it's kind of like this season 2 is like just out of nowhere. I can't stand it. But yeah, The Wire is great.
Okay. What about Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Do you watch that at all?
Brooklyn Nine-Nine is hysterical. I just think it's hysterical in a comedy sense.
I don't watch it for realism or anything, but that show.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I guess it is a police show. It's centered around police stuff, but it's it's just funny. But I think it's funny. I think it's great. I mean, that same cast could be. They could be doing like it could be Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it's the staff of a Burger King. Or it's the staff of a paper mill,
or a Parks and Recreation,
or Parks. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that, those group of characters you could just pick up and put in anywhere, and it would be funny. So because it centers around police, I do like it, but I don't watch it as much as. I mean, I haven't watched it in a while, actually.
We just caught up last night. It's still pretty good.
Did you?
Still pretty good. What's funny is I was trying to think of like my favorite cop movies first. I don't watch a lot of them. I have seen Training Day, and I like Training Day, but I haven't seen it since theaters. I probably gravitate more toward crime movies than cop movies.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't watch a movie necessarily about the FBI taking down the mafia, but I'll watch Goodfellas over and over and over again, or The Godfather. Writing's not as cinematic of a thing. It's not as cool to write about, but there are some good movies.
You know what writer movie I love?
What one?
Is it Funny Farm with Chevy
Chase? I have not seen that in ages.
Where he wants to be a writer, or he is a writer.
He moves out to the country.
Moves out to the country so he can write his big novel.
Yeah.
And, he wants that peace and quiet, like out in like New Hampshire. And all the stuff, like his, the townsfolk like can't stand him, and because he did some big city thing or whatever. But when I think of like writing, that's like the first movie that comes to mind is that.
I didn't even think of that. I immediately went to All the President's Men because I was a reporter. It's so good. It is 1976, I think, and it's Robert Redford, Dustin Hoffman. And it's about Woodward and Bernstein, who they basically were the reporters who broke open the Watergate scandal and brought down Nixon. And it is so good. Like, as someone who's worked in journalism, it's the most true to life thing I've ever seen. Like, just how they go and knock on doors and make phone calls, and they're piecing together a story, and just one little tip will lead to something else. So they have this giant story, but they have to make sure everything's true. And it just like it gets that kind of like adrenaline of chasing down a lead, and then the frustration of trying to make sure everything is accurate and true. A really good movie. I love it. It sounds like it would be dull, but it's paced like a thriller.
Okay.
Like, it really feels like a thriller, and it's so entertaining. I think the closest any other film has gotten to that in showing journalism has been Spotlight. Have you seen that?
No.
That was another true story, and it's about the Boston Globe reporters who revealed the sex scandal and cover up in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And it won Best Picture like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's so good. It, like as someone who has done that job, it gets it spot on. It's just a bunch of work and phone calls. Because what movies always get wrong about reporters is they're always sleeping with their sources.
Right,
and to my chagrin, that has never happened to me. So my life was not as exciting. I did once, however. I once was interviewing this old lady in her driveway.
Ooh.
She was telling me this heart-wrenching story. Like the boys, it was
she had a wardrobe malfunction.
No, it was worse. It was
Oh, Lord.
It was the story was that the Boy Scouts had gone over and cleaned up her yard for her because she was old, and she's telling me this sob story about how she had cancer.
Sob story.
And,
it's the truth.
okay, well, it's the truth. Yes. Okay, I didn't mean sob story. Okay, this story about how she had cancer and she was a Holocaust survivor.
Oh yeah, real sob story, Chris.
Well, okay, but it was hard to focus because
Like a sob story is if I told you like my crappy day and I want sympathy.
What?
She was a Holocaust
That
survivor.
was 40 years or
Get
60
over
years.
it.
Anyways, it was a very compelling, sad story.
This is the greatest story I've ever heard Chris tell.
Well, it's about to get better because the reason I could not focus was at the same time her dog is humping my leg. So all that for like I think what was like a paragraph story in the paper.
Now, would you call The Shining a writer's story?
I would so. Sure, because the book is definitely about a writer who has writer's block and goes to this cabin in the woods. Yeah, I would call it that, and it really captures into that kind of frustration you get when you don't have a story, when you can't get it. I was thinking about it this week. Like most movies about writing, like they also piss me off because writing is easy in the movies. They sit down and it's just like 2 hours later they've written like 5,000 words and it's done and everything is a masterpiece. I spent 5 days trying to get an 800-word story done this week.
Ooh.
Like over the past week. This little blog entry that I knew from the start. I had the idea. And I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. And I could see like the outline of what it was, but getting the words to go after each other in a way that felt right and felt organic. It was like I was writing a sentence at a time, and then I would walk away, and then I would come back and I'd be like, okay, let's get 2 more sentences.
It was like me in every high school homework assignment.
It's bad. Like writing is one of those things that writers love to write and we hate to write. It's the same thing. Like you kind of like to have written, like you like having it there and finished, but the actual task of it can sometimes just be so frustrating. And then it gets done and you're happy with it.
Now I have another.
Yeah.
It's Stand By Me.
I have never seen Stand By Me.
What?
Yeah.
You've never seen Stand By Me?
I have not seen Stand By Me. I can't believe I have not.
All right, I'm giving it to you tonight.
I will watch it. It's been on my list of things I need to see.
Yes, I'm giving it to you. Oh my gosh. It's the reason I say it is because the movie starts with Richard Dreyfuss. I believe it's Richard Dreyfuss. No? Is it Richard Dreyfuss? And he's... Man, who is it? Now I'm confused. Well, he's like, because now I'm thinking, am I thinking The Sandlot?
Where Richard Dreyfuss was not in The Sandlot, I can tell you that much.
He wasn't?
No.
At the beginning? Man, I'm messed up now. I got a million things going through my head, but I believe at the beginning of Stand By Me is a dude like sitting down at a typewriter and he's writing about his
that sounds
childhood.
more in line with what it would be with what you have in mind because that's a Stephen King thing. So I definitely would watch that.
I'll
been
give
on
it to you before
on my
you
shame
go.
list for a while. The other movie I did think of though was Almost Famous, which a lot of people they jump to it as a rock and roll movie, which I would totally get.
Right.
But the perspective of it is a young writer who is writing a story for Rolling Stone, and his question is, do I present this as accurate, or do I keep my friends and hide all the dirty stuff they're doing?
Right.
And I love that movie. That is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, that is a good movie. That is a good movie.
Other than that, the only other thing I could think of was Barton Fink. Have you seen that one? It's an old Coen Brothers movie with John Goodman and John Turturro, and it's about a screenwriter in L.A. who ends up at this hotel, and it's just this weird movie where the hotel might actually be hell, and it might be a metaphor for the Holocaust, and there's all these weird things going on.
That old sob story.
Yeah, that old sob story.
Shit, I can't even say that as a joke.
John Goodman is humping his leg the whole movie. It's crazy.
Like, I have to ask for forgiveness for even saying that as a joke. Well, Flint Town.
Flint Town, yeah.
So what did you think of it?
Well, first, let's tell people what it is.
Okay.
It's 8 episodes long. It is a docuseries on Netflix. For those who aren't from around the Detroit area, Flint is, about an hour away from here?
Yeah, about an hour north of Detroit.
An hour north of Detroit. It is one of the most poverty-stricken cities in America, one of the most highly violent areas of the city. I think it's even more violent than Detroit on a lot of statistics.
Yeah, because of per capita.
Yeah. So this story follows...
But Flint used to be one of the richest.
Yeah, a lot like Detroit.
Like Flint, basically Detroit opened, it was, Motor City, and then they opened a bunch of factories up in Flint, and when that opened, it was a factory city away from the big city of Detroit. So people moved up to Flint. They could work at the factories, but they could also kind of have these houses and yards that had more room than in Detroit. And they kind of made it Detroit Part 2. And what was bad about Detroit, they corrected in Flint. And so it was kind of almost this perfect little town. And then in the 70s, the auto companies, when they started sending stuff overseas or to Mexico and things like that, they shut Flint down, and that was the backbone. That was the lifeblood.
And then it did become Detroit too.
Yeah, of Flint. And so with the auto companies leaving, crippled Flint. Absolutely crippled it. It was the highest unemployment rate in the country. And for those of you that are our age, I don't know if you remember the game Sim City. Sim City was a computer game where you could, build a city. Well, one of the pre-loaded games, if you will, that you could play, you could load Flint in like 1976, and what you did in the game was you tried to correct the unemployment. Oh, wow. So in the game, like, that was like a big thing is, when you built your city, you had everything. You tried to keep your unemployment, you tried to keep your taxes happy, your tax base, all that stuff. But that was one of the things. Like, you could either pick like Los Angeles after the giant earthquake and like try and rebuild it. One was Flint and try and get the... I
never knew they had preloaded cities. I always thought you just built a town and that was it.
What am I thinking? Not like preloaded cities, but a preloaded like task.
Situation. Okay.
Like task that you had to do. And and how long would it take to get the unemployment under control? So like Flint was big enough to obviously like do something like that. So I forget what unemployment was back then, but it was astronomical. And then the show talks about, you had the GM and the motor companies leave in the 70s. Then in the 80s, the crack epidemic hit and just decimated it. And then as of recently, now the water crisis.
And it's high gang area.
Yeah. So through all of this, you have the Flint Police Department that at their peak was, 300 people, 300 officers, and now they're down to 98.
98 for what did they say to? It's like, what was the population? I feel like it's like 100,000 at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
It might have even been more than that. But it was, the amount of police to people is sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's, this docuseries is through the eyes of the Flint Police Department. So here they are trying to hold a city and uphold the laws and the craziness to a manageable level, and they're completely understaffed, and they understand the climate of the times and what's going on, and they're trying to help, but they don't have the money and whatever to do it. And what's going on within the city is what we're all probably facing in most cities across America right now, and it's crazy watching these guys do what they're doing.
Yeah, I had heard about the show a few weeks ago. I think just a few days before we started recording our last episode. And my initial thought was, I'm not interested in that show, because I was under the impression that it was Cops Flint. Like, basically, Just here, watch them arrest all the crazy people in Flint. And I'm like, I don't want to see that. That feels like you're laughing at people's problems,
right?
Or it feels cliche. I'm like, if you're going to deal with Flint, a city that's close to us. My wife is from the Flint area, like the same way we're from Detroit. She grew up in Fenton. I'm like, if you're going to deal with that, then deal with it in a way that looks at the problem and looks at the city. And that's actually what this show was.
Yeah.
I thought they would go through the police. But through the police, you get an idea of the political mess that they're in, where the city council is they're at odds with the police chief. The mayor brings in a new chief within a month of coming on board. The residents are often hostile to the police, not even because they don't like the police, but because they're just fed up with their life in this city. And you really get this picture of this town. But the thing I took away the most is how tired everyone looks in this.
Yeah.
It was just exhausting. It made me think, why? You do this for a living. And I was honestly thinking, what mental defect to make someone do this job? Because I could not do that. I like to go into my 8 to 5 and do my job, fix my commas, and leave. And I understand this drive to want to make the city a better place, but it's in this case, to barely hold down a job, to barely afford a house, and with the risk of being laid off in this city.
Yeah.
I'm like, why keep doing it? I really gained a lot of respect. But as someone who does law enforcement, I want to know your perspective. What did you think about the show? And then we can hit on some of the issues they hit.
Well, the first thing that stood out to me was how vulnerable they show police. Mm-hmm. I love how they showed the Flint Police Department and the people's vulnerability. And I think that's what is needed in the media today. Anybody who's law enforcement, we're not looked at as people. We're looked at like these robots who go out and just hammer people, and this is the law, this is what we do, deal with it. And then we plug in at the end of the night like RoboCop.
Yeah.
And the media makes us out to look like this. And I think this show shows that it shows people and their aspirations and where they came from and the reason why people do what they do. And it shows, how law enforcement has to go to a scene not knowing what's going on, with people yelling and screaming. Mm-hmm. We have to figure out who's right, who's wrong. We have to get to the bottom of things right there with people screaming at us and mad at us. And, you get called where, I used to work in Detroit, and it happens in the city that I work now. But you'll get called, it happened a lot more in Detroit. You'll get called on a call to where somebody calls and says, my boyfriend's beating me up. And so we're just responding to the call that we got, that, this woman says that she's being beaten up. And we get there and she's beaten up. And she points to her boyfriend on the couch, and we arrest the boyfriend who's on the couch because she's beating up, and she's been beaten up. And the next thing we know, she's on my back punching me because we've arrested her boyfriend and we're taking him to jail. So now we have her fighting us, and all we did was respond to the call because we believed that a woman was being hurt. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a fight with sometimes up to an entire family. Jeez. And what did we do? And then when we finish and finally when things happen and cooler heads prevail or the situation gets talked to or gets sorted out, it's like all she wanted was him to leave the house. She didn't want us to arrest him. She just wanted him to go and cool off. Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, people don't realize, if you've been beaten up, that's assault and battery, domestic violence. The other person is getting arrested. We just can't say, run along. We have to do our job. And so many times, we get put in those situations, and, I'm sure the media on television, you see all the crazy situations we get put in, and a lot of times cell phone videos and security camera videos, they don't show the whole picture. The media will show 10 seconds of a clip to get viewers, to get people watching, and they don't show the other 20 minutes of what had happened and what was going on. They'll just show the worst 10 seconds of that video. And so I love Flint Town because it shows the vulnerability of officers. It shows that they're human beings. They're people that are working and just trying to do the best that they can. They have aspirations to be in the FBI. They have aspirations to be detectives. Some, are being police officers because they're pastors, and their pastor job doesn't afford an income.
Yeah.
So they're police officers and they're pastors on their off time and things like that. So that's what I really enjoyed. It showed the true, like, just like you said, like Cops and stuff. Cops is like that show where it's like it's
Cops is
entertainment.
entertaining, but it also plays into stereotypes on both sides.
Exactly. And so you watch that, and someone who hates cops can watch Cops and continue to hate cops. I think Flint Town, when you watch it, you can see, like, even if you hate cops, you could be like, well, I see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Like, I think even the person that is just the most anti-government can watch Flint Town, and at least to themselves, they might not say it because if they are the biggest, whatever, they might not do it. But at least in their own mind, they could probably look at it and say, these are people. Like, at some point, being a human being, you have to look at another human being who's broken, who's frustrated, who's all this, and see that. On the flip, I think the show does a great job. It's not biased towards any one way.
No. In fact, but I do want to. I want to hit that because I think there's a lot it says about, like, the racial dynamics that is really well done. But I want to go back to the vulnerability thing because that was one thing I noticed, and kind of what you were talking about was over time you can change your view towards it, and I think that's something that an 8-hour show allows you to do that a 2-hour movie wouldn't. Like, if this was a 2-hour documentary as opposed to 8-part series. And that actually happened with me because I remember we were actually talking beforehand about Frost. And I remember he showed up in the first episode, and just the first few things he said and his whole demeanor, I remember thinking, I'm like, this guy's a dick. Yeah. I'm like, I don't like this guy. This is going to be the guy who's the caricature of every bad cop because he's such a hard ass. But over the episodes, you see that, he's involved in this relationship with his coworker, and he's trying to make a good home for her, and he's been laid off several times, and he's a nice guy. You see him being kind of a hard ass, but you see him dealing with people in the community too, and being very friendly and very cordial and fair with them, and you start to put together that this hard persona he has, it's kind of the uniform he puts on every day.
Yeah.
He has to do it to get through, to get his job done. And I liked him a lot by the end because I thought, well, you know what? That makes me understand kind of why he comes off that way. And he purposefully has to. And he's one of the guys who looks most exhausted by the end of the thing.
Right.
And I loved that because you are seeing this is not just an authority figure because, you don't know, you probably do know this. Most of our interactions with cops are because there's something negative going on.
Right.
And so, I worked with, when I was a reporter, I worked with the police all the time. Loved it. They were the nicest people. But man, I see those lights going behind my car, I'm swearing up a storm because I'm like, they're gonna get me for something stupid.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, even me as a police officer, I don't like when a cop's behind me. And let me tell you this, people out there, just a little hint. If a police officer is behind you on the street and you're driving your car and a cop is behind you, just get to the right. Just move over. Because if he's going to pull you over, he's going to pull you over. But if he's not going to pull you over, just move to the right and he'll pass. Because most likely he's right behind you because he's trying to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. Here's another thing that people don't realize with us in law enforcement. Because so many lawsuits have come against police departments and cities, we're not allowed to turn our lights on all the time. Mm-hmm. So there's only certain situations where we're allowed to turn our lights and sirens off. Like when you come
to an intersection and it's red and you flip it on and then you flip it off after you go through the
Correct. So when you go through an intersection, you have to have your lights on. But continuing to that run might not be something that you have to have your lights on for. Yeah. So let's just say somebody walked in their house and found their grandmother dead. Okay, so they walk into their house, they walk to check on their grandma, they walk in the house and they see her dead. Okay, that person would be extremely upset if it took us, 15 minutes to get to their house. They want obviously someone there. Their grandma is dead. Can she be revived? Can she whatever? But when we get that, that's the type of thing that in law enforcement, we can't go lights and sirens to that call. Because if we were to be going lights and sirens and a child stepped out in front of our car and said child was to get hit, what would happen is lawyers and everybody else would come down and say, why were you going lights and sirens? That lady was dead.
I didn't even think about that. I always just thought they wanted to get to the red light.
She's dead. There was nothing you can do about that. She's dead. You did not have to go lights and sirens, and little Johnny is now killed because of that. And so they would get, the department, the officer, the city would get sued. So there's been so many lawsuits as to what we can and cannot have our lights and sirens on for. Yes, so if old lady Johnson is found dead in her home, I might want to drive, if it's 35 miles an hour, I might want to drive 50. And I'm driving at a quick pace, and I come up to that red light, I check it, I turn on my lights, my overheads, to make sure that I can safely go through that intersection, because that's another quote unquote legality that we have to do. I go through the intersection, I shut my lights off, and I continue to drive so I can get to that house in 3 minutes, in 5 minutes, as opposed to 15. And you know what I mean?
Now I feel bad about flipping you guys off.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why we as police officers do what we do, and the general public doesn't know, and they're like, well, why do they get to do this and why do they get to do that? And just to let you guys know, that's the reason, is due to legalities and lawsuits, there's a lot of things that we can and can't do. But if it was you'd want us there as soon as we could possibly get there. And that's what we have to do. We have to walk that line of speeding somewhere without our lights on, going slightly over the speed limit. I get that all the time. Well, how come I'm driving the speed limit? And, I paced so-and-so and it was a 35 and I bet they were doing 42. Well, again, I'm doing 7 over because I'm trying to get to this or that, So those are the issues with that. I forget where that comes into play as to what we were just talking about.
I think I was just talking about how when you're dealing with cops, you're usually not in a good mood. You're not in a good place. And I think that's what the show really gets across too. So imagine my little frustration of being pulled over, or someone's frustration of waiting for Joe to be there 15 minutes. Now, pull that out, and you've got, instead of me being pulled over, I'm living in the poorest city. I'm besieged by drugs, besieged by crime. I'm just in a bad mood all the time. Joe isn't 15 minutes late after I call him. He's 24 hours late after I call him. That's what they're dealing with in Flint. And I think it really gets in the head of, we understand why the people of Flint are so upset, but it also gets into the head of, these cops are tired. They are constantly going into something, not knowing if, in an atmosphere where police are being shot, where racial tension is high. So they're always just on alert, and you feel the anxiety that they feel. And I think it does a good job of capturing that everyone's kind of miserable there. Yeah. And they have to deal with it together. They have to figure out a way, which I think leads into the fact that it's very fair about showing some of the concerns and frustrations people have, especially minorities have these days, but also where the police are coming from and how even between police officers, there's not an agreement on that, about what's to blame and what's going on and if there's a problem.
And who to vote for or all that stuff. Because while the show's being filmed, the presidential Trump-Hillary race is going on. And so you're seeing that, and you're seeing the different officers in the police department, argue, either side and things like that. And there's just so many things that the normal public, and even me, going into it, I thought, I'm going to be a police officer, and I know cops, and I know this, and I know that. And once you become it, your eyes are opened to this entire world that the average person doesn't see. And I always, with friends and family, I can always joke, if we decided to drive to downtown Clawson, where I live in Clawson here. We decided to go downtown Clawson and eat at a restaurant. We're probably going to drive there. You're probably going to listen to the radio. Me and you are sitting together. I'm driving, you're shotgun. We're listening to the radio. We listen to a song. You're humming along to the song. We get there. We go in. We're going to sit too. We go and we sit down. You're going to figure out what you want to eat. And then we hear somebody yelling and screaming in the corner. And you're like, what in the world is going on? Well, for me, I walk outside my house to get in the car. I'm looking all around the neighborhood. I'm seeing that my neighbor that lives across the street from me got his tether removed from his ankle. So now I know, okay, he's no longer being watched. We're getting in the car. We're driving. I'm seeing this guy speeding down. I know this guy's not going to stop at the stop sign because his speed isn't going that which he's going to stop at the stop sign. So I know this guy's going to blow the stop sign, all while you're just kind of humming, maybe checking your phone. I'm seeing 100 things happen on the way to the restaurant. Once in the restaurant, we're sitting down. I'm looking at everyone's hands all around. I don't want to sit with my back to the door. I want to know who's coming in. I want to be able to see the register if something happens. I'm constantly looking at everyone's hands. I'm looking at people's eyes, seeing whose eyes are doing. The couple that, as soon as your attention goes to the couple who stood up in the corner and started yelling at each other, I've already been watching for 5 minutes them do the silent argue back and forth, talking with their hands, knocked over a cup of water. I knew something was going to go already. And so these are what normal people don't get is we as officers are trained, and through our experience, we pick up on all this craziness that nobody else does.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. It is exhausting. And that's why it's really nice to, I know talking with my friends that are in law enforcement and things like that, it's very nice to go up north or go on a vacation. Because when I go on a vacation, I'm not the police at that point. If I go up to my dad's, lake house, we're on the lake. I know the neighbors. I know no one's pulling a gun on me. I'm not looking at hands. My brain can actually shut off and just enjoy an amazing Michigan summer day on a lake. Whereas even here, if I were to go to Metro Beach, I'm still plugged in the community enough. And if I'm there with my kids or things like that, there's enough strangers that I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So my radar is always going. So when you're with people that and you're at somebody's house and you can just relax and you don't have to worry about all that stuff, it's a total different dynamic and you get a total different personality. The people that at work, then you see them at home and you're like, man, this guy's a different guy. Because we have to go and we put on our uniform and we put that badge on and we have to become like actors. I think I've become a master of my girlfriend, she doesn't like it because she sees it in me we're masters of compartmentalizing things. I go to work and I can pull somebody over for speeding and then go from a speeding call to somebody who's they didn't get their sprinkler system blown out, so a pipe burst in their front yard. And for whatever reason, police get called to it. So now I have to go to somebody's house that they have water gushing everywhere and help them kind of stop that and call whoever needs to be called to help them get that fixed. Then I get called to a kid's house, a 5-year-old who just died of cancer. And so I have to be there with the family whose son just passed away in the bed to cancer. So now I'm dealing with a dead 5-year-old. And I will go from that dead 5-year-old over to somebody who feels the service that they got at a restaurant was rude, so they didn't leave a tip. So the waitress started yelling at them because they didn't tip the waitress. So now they're like, well, I'm calling the cops. So people have no idea that I'm showing up for your petty little, I didn't get tipped well enough or she didn't tip me at all. And they have no idea that a police officer just came from a deceased 5-year-old or somebody who just committed suicide or you name it. We've seen it. So these are the things that I think Flint Town, although it doesn't get that deep and that graphic on some, it has some murder scenes that it goes to
tough.
And things like that. But so in that sense, it's showing what police officers have to do on the daily. And even in that show, they go out and they work a huge shift where they have to deal with murder and they have to deal with all that stuff. And then they have to get up on their day off and go door to door and chit chat with people about renewing the millage.
Yeah.
You know, those are things that we have to do, and people just don't realize it. They just think we're robots that go out and we're programmed to piss people off and ruin people's days. You know, firemen. There's always the joke between police and firemen. Everybody loves firemen. Everybody hates cops.
Because firemen always show up to be the hero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And firemen don't pull people over for speeding.
Yeah.
And people, you know, but I'll tell you what, firemen will call out to us, you know, talk to us on the radio if they're flying down the street in their fire truck and someone doesn't get over. You know, they're like, hey, this car, give them a ticket, do this, do that. You know, so they just show up. They're the hero, and we show up, and, you know, unfortunately, people don't like, you know, 70% of the time, people don't like what we're doing. But if we didn't do it, it'd be chaos.
Yeah. I think what the show does really well, too, with that is, again, going back to the whole idea of race, which I knew would be big in the show because it's big in our society right now. It does show how, you know, the African-American community is, by and large, leery of people in power. And I understand that we have a nation that has not treated them well for a long time. But I also understand that a cop, like you said, they don't know what they're walking into. And you have a way where you have to behave, black or white. You've got to be ready for anything. But, like, what's the difference between a white cop and a black cop? What are they seeing? You know, the difference they have. They're bringing their own histories. And I think what it says is not, here's what the problem is. It just simply says, the problem exists. It's a mess. And the only way we deal with it is to kind of be a community together.
Yeah.
And there aren't, you know, this isn't a show that I think places the blame on anyone in the city. You know, in terms of residents, it doesn't place the blame on the police. There are a lot of scenes of people just talking and talking each other down and checking in with each other. You know, going up to the convenience store to make sure they're doing everything right. Checking in on someone's house and being that presence in the community to the point where people in the community are saying, hey, you know what would really help us? If our police walked the streets again, if we saw them, if they were that presence again, which you don't, that's not the sentiment you see in the news a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really like a call for community that I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it was in episode 6 or 7. There's an older African-American woman who just kind of off the rip just has this like phenomenal little like monologue that she tells a group of people. Mm-hmm. And she does, you know, it's a fantastic speech about community where she's like, the police didn't build Flint. The police didn't ruin Flint. Mm-hmm. Like, drugs didn't ruin Flint. You know, all these things, like, you know, she kind of goes through with all these different things that, like, all these excuses. And then she just kind of says, we did. Mm-hmm. We as the community have built and destroyed Flint. And she's like, but we as the community can bring it back. It's, you know, it's not the police officers keeping us down. It's not this keeping us down. It's not that. It's the fact that we're choosing to focus on these things instead of choosing to make change and build.
Yeah.
And so in that like little like, you know, speech she gives, like, I thought that was the most powerful. And she's not a police officer. I don't think she's on the city board. I think she's just a citizen. And she might even say it when she stands up at like a community meeting or something. And I don't know if that was scripted. You know, the show doesn't seem to be a scripted show.
No, everything seems very genuine.
Yeah, it does. And so, you know, at no point in any of the police footage do you think like, oh, I bet they shot that 4 times. No, I don't believe they did. I think everything is a one-take shot, and they did what they did. And so I believe her speech is very genuine and not scripted in the sense that maybe she wrote it at home knowing she was going to come and say that. But I mean, I'm saying like I don't think writers for the show sat down and was like, this is what you're going to say.
It's probably edited. I'm sure it's edited a certain way. Now, here's a question, though. Some of these officers are having scenes where they're going out to search houses for people who might be walking around with a gun. So let's say if they did the city where you're a police officer, they did that town, would you really want a news crew or a camera crew following you around with a bright light as you're searching a backyard for a gunman? Because I kept thinking of that. I'm like, what? Turn your stinking lights off.
Yeah, you know what? Those are the situations that maybe, now that you're reminding me, those might be some of the situations where it's like, cameraman, stay in the car.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in and search this house, and when it's okay, then you can come in and we'll search the house again,
Yeah,
so it looks like we are. Those are probably the situations that are quote-unquote scripted. Because, yeah, a cameraman, I mean, unless you're a war correspondent, you're not going to be wanting to do that. The crazy thing is a police officer seeing is, when I worked in Detroit was obviously so dangerous and, had that danger potential that we rode two-man cars because we had the manpower to ride two-man cars. Flint has 98 uniformed officers. Some of those officers are in desk jobs in the station, and then you're splitting those, leftover officers between like 3 shifts or 2 shifts, depending on what they're doing. I don't know if they run 12-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, or 8-hour shifts, but you're then splitting those guys between different shifts. And there's a few times in the show where they say, okay, tonight we have 9 cars to cover the whole city. Well, each car only has 1 person in it. And that's what me and my friends at work and my coworkers, that's one thing that like shocked the daylights out of us. That, like you said, hey, there's an armed gunman. He just robbed somebody at gunpoint and they think he ran into this house. And then 1 officer is showing up. Yeah. Like that would never happen. In the city that I work in now, it would never happen. We ride one-man cars, but they would call 2 cars or more to that area. And like, if I hear somebody like, hey, so-and-so with a gun, and let's say car 1 and 2 get dispatched to man with a gun over in this area, just because they're dispatched to it, everybody is going over to back them and help them and do what they can. So that's what's crazy, like in Flint Town, is like people are just going like one-man cars to deal with these situations that I would never do on my own. And here's like one of the women, Bridget, I don't know, her first name is Bridget. She's like the female, the brunette in the show.
She's the one who's dating Frost.
She's dating Frost. And, she's like the up-and-coming, detective girl, stuff like that. Like, here she is. She's probably 110 pounds, with all her equipment and boots on. And she's just like walking into these places that like, I'm 6'5", 270. A lot of times I have a partner that's 6'4", probably 260. We wouldn't, I wouldn't go in without him to some of these calls, and they have to do it on their own.
That's Flint Town.
That's Flint Town.
The one thing that I do wish the show had expounded on more and didn't wait till the last episode to get to. So near the end, they start having this millage come up. That's a huge deal, and it actually adds a lot of suspense to the show. You wouldn't think a millage vote would, but it adds a lot of suspense. But in the last episode, they also start playing into this idea that the city council is against the chief of police. They see him as kind of just more of in it for himself and political, which I kind of went back and forth. Like, I didn't know what to think about the police chief in that. Like, is he really in it, or is he for himself? But they get into this political angle where it's the city council against him, and I wish they had put that more through the show. And maybe just filming schedules didn't allow for it, but I wish I had seen a little bit more of that. That was like the only complaint I had, though.
Well, the other thing you got to think of is political garbage. They're not going to let cameras and microphones
is true, too.
in with any of that. I mean, what they're getting, I think the reason you're seeing Flint being done in a documentary is because they need money. And there's even a part in the show where they take all the old guns from like the warehouse and old evidence and they sell them. If my department wouldn't even dream of doing that, because it's like a taboo idea.
Yeah.
Like in law enforcement and police departments, you don't take guns off the street to then sell them back to go out onto the street. Like, that's just asinine. But Flint, their budget sucks so much that they sell these extra guns to collectors,
or when they get a police dog, they have to name him after the company that gave it.
That's exactly.
Crazy too.
Like how you name a stadium or something like that. And so that's probably why they got to film the documentary in the first place.
Okay.
Netflix, I'm guessing, was probably saying, here's a pile of cash.
I
You
know.
know, and they were like, dude, we're not getting money from anywhere else. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen?
Mm-hmm.
So they probably did that, took the money and gave these guys full access, but they probably had full access to a point. Obviously, they're not going to have access to political meetings and stuff where
but
these
a lot
things
of,
are being
like,
filmed.
that's the thing. Like, the city council meetings, though,
But those are public.
those are all public record. They don't come until the end. That was the thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, what I would love to see like, I don't know what the deal is, if it's there's going to be a season 2 or what. But what I would love to see is kind of what we were talking about with The Wire. Like, maybe a season 2 is also about the schools, like Flint schools. And maybe part 3 is about, I don't know, something to do with the whole water mess. And you just get this picture of how is this city, like, all the things that make a city so troubled.
See, I hope they don't do another season.
Really?
Yeah, because I think those are the type of shows, like those docuseries shows, that the people in front of the camera get comfortable.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I wouldn't want to see them come back and do the police.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, if you want to do Flint, you know, whatever, 2 years later, because I think it was filmed over 2014, 2015.
Well, it would have ended in 2016.
Did it?
Because they had the presidential election in there.
Oh, you're right.
So it was, I think, 2015
15,
16.
16.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't want it to get like comfortable where then you have guys that are putting in their applications to work for Flint, to be the rookie on the staff. And then, you know, you got the guy who's like, well, maybe if I can be the most pissed off vet, I'll have my own little segment. And so I would much rather have them go do another city, like a city down south. That how is Podunk Town, Mississippi, dealing with the climate of today and their issues, you know, like I always think like, you know, we've talked about how I love like war movies and stuff like Ken Burns' The War. With World War II, like ships and everything, lots of stuff were built like in like Biloxi and stuff like that in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and all these places. I'd love to see one of those towns that used to be like build ships and warships and all this stuff, and now that's done. And how the police departments down there have dealt with, you know, unemployment, Hurricane Katrina, like the rebuilding of that area. Like, I would love to see it go somewhere else. You don't give a group of people or a police department the ability to get comfortable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Or the city. Because if it comes out, oh, guess what? Flint Town's doing another episode. Well, then people in Flint are reading that too. So now they know, hey, if I call the cops, the cameras could be showing up.
That's true. Or the politicians put on a show.
Exactly. Now everyone's putting on a show. And that's what I liked about just the one season. We're not sitting here talking about how people played things up. It was just raw. Yeah. And I think I would want that in the next city. Like, I'd want it to be just raw.
I totally be on board with that.
I do want to tell you guys, if you enjoy Flint Town, another great, it's a movie to watch, is Burn. And Burn is on Netflix, and you could they play it for free on Amazon Prime. It's about a 2-hour documentary about the Detroit Fire Department.
I have seen that. Yes, that's a very good movie.
And that's a fantastic movie too. So if you enjoy Flint Town, check out Burn, and you should like that one as well.
That's a good one. Highly recommend that.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of our show this week.
Yeah, that was fun.
So yeah, it was good stuff. You can go back and watch it a third time now.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, where can people find you online, Joe?
Oh boy, you can find me wherever.
All right. Yeah.
I think if anybody wants to try and find me, they can find me.
Oh, yeah. You can find me on Twitter at mere Chris-ianity. There's only one T in that. I want to screw up your spell checkers. So, but you can also find me on Pathos now. My blog is also called Mere Chris-ianity, and I'll link to it in the show notes so you don't have to worry about spelling, but I've got a lot of good stuff on there. I've written an odd amount about DC Talk lately, so if you like that, go read about some DC Talk, but I've also got some good faith-related stuff on there. So, and you'll find episodes of Cross Culture Critic on there with extra show notes. So,
Bam.
So go ahead and listen to that. So we'll be back next week.
All right, see you.